The story begins with a police officer, Jordan Bryant, trying to stop a woman from jumping off the roof. Sadly, he can't get to her in time. Is this why the movie is called A Fall from Grace? Jordan gets home and cuddles with his wife. Who this man because he foine? His wife, Jasmine Bryant, is a lawyer and worries about her husband's mental health. However, he doesn't open up about what he just saw. Everyone in town is talking about Grace Waters, the woman who allegedly killed her husband. So Jasmine is surprised when her boss, Rory, gives her the case. Rory says Grace wants to plead guilty, so it will be easy work for Jasmine. All she has to do is talk to the DA and get the plea deal so they don't have to take it to trial. Tyler Perry trying to pull off the Tamu Morgan Freeman look. Jasmine's friends, Donnie and Tilsa, are both jealous and thrilled that the case is given to Jasmine because a lot of them at the public defender's office want it. Jasmine heads to the correctional facility to meet Grace, and the officer assures her not to worry because Grace will be shackled. Jasmine introduces herself and gets offended when Grace points out that she went to a community college. Grace, you got no right with your disheveled-looking ass. Because Grace didn't have a record, Jasmine wants to ask for 15 years with the possibility of parole. Grace doesn't mind, but she specifically asks that she'll be locked up close to town so she'll be near her son. After checking the files himself, Donnie thinks there are a lot of good things about Grace that can help Jasmine build a solid defense. Not only did she do a lot of charity work, but she even worked at a Sunday school. But Jasmine insists that Grace wants to plead guilty and even confess to the authorities. Donnie stands on business saying there's something afoot and doesn't believe Grace is completely guilty. However, this gets they asses thrown out the couple's apartment. Later that night, Jasmine admits that she doesn't want to be a lawyer anymore, defending murderers and thieves, and that she is only staying long enough to be able to pay off her student loans because Republicans didn't want to forgive them. Damn, look at Jordan. This man's name should be Mario because he can punch all the coins out of me. The next day, Grace's son, Malcolm Waters, comes to see Jasmine. He's convinced that his mother is innocent, so he asks Jasmine to save her. But Jasmine says since Grace wants to plead, there's nothing else she can do. The DA rejects the 15-year plea and insists on giving the maximum to Grace. Jasmine then tells Grace to take the deal, because if they take it to trial, the DA could ask for the death penalty. Grace agrees, but she breaks down even before Jasmine leaves the room. Where's Annalise Keating when you need her? To learn more about Grace as a person, Jasmine visits Grace's friend, Sarah. Jasmine sees an old black woman in the window, one of Sarah's tenants, but she hides as soon as she's spotted. Sarah is a soft-spoken old woman who has nothing but praises for Grace. She describes Grace as a very kind soul. Worried that Grace will grow old alone after her divorce, Sarah encouraged her to start dating again using Grindr. But I think she got her apps mixed up. The old tenant shows up again but gets spooks and runs off. Sarah also takes out a flyer she got from Grace's house. She says it's from the art gallery where Grace met her second husband. After that, Jasmine tries to look more into the case and finds the blood splatter doesn't exactly match the narrative. Jordan praises her skills. Cab, except for him because he foine. She takes the blood splatter to Rory, asking for an expert to have it checked. Rory is pissed because they don't have the budget for that. Also, he expects Jasmine to get the plea deal signed as soon as possible. So Jasmine complies and takes the deal to Grace. Just before Grace signs, Jasmine shows her the flyer and asks about her husband. Grace cries as she remembers her life before. One day she received a flyer from Sarah about an art gallery. There she met a foine-ass young man who was wearing an Uso necklace. This man turned out to be the very talented photographer, Shannon DeLong. Who this man? Is his schlong DeLong too? After the toast, Grace leaves without saying goodbye. Not long after their first meeting, Grace receives some gifts from Shannon, asking her to call him. Despite being interested, Grace tried to play hard to get, but only for a day because her kitty was purring. And on their first date, he said he will bring her to a hole-in-the-wall diner. I'm sure that's not the only hole he finna enter that night. After, Shannon admits he likes Grace. By the time the date ended at 2 a.m., the two were already hooked on each other. One date led to another, and Grace quickly fell for him despite being worried about their huge age gap. She proudly talked about supporting herself after her divorce and not getting anything from her ex-husband. She also mentioned that she already paid for her own house. One night, Shannon proposed to Grace in a flower garden. She said yes, then finally let him break her back. Literally because she old. Jasmine wants to know more, but Grace reminds her that she has never tried a case before. People talk and say that Jasmine is the worst at the public defender's office, the lawyer who doesn't win and only pleads. Read her to filth. Then Grace signs the agreement while Jasmine cries. Jasmine is convinced there's more to the story, so she comes back to see Grace. Grace reveals she married Shannon, and all was perfect. He was loving, kind, respectful, and on top of that, he was fine. He also kept taking photos of Grace all the time. One night, Grace woke up and Shannon was not beside her. She heard him talking on the phone. After realizing Grace was there, he ended the call and faced her. Grace asked him who it was, and Shannon snapped, saying he didn't like being questioned. He quickly apologized when Grace got scared. Grace called Sarah regularly to tell her about Shannon, and Sarah was always willing to listen. Something is up with this old hoe, Sarah. One day at the office, Grace was called by the bosses, asking her about some stolen money from her account. $379,000. Grace was hearing this for the first time, but the bosses fired her and demanded that she return the money if she doesn't want to go to prison. She confided in Sarah, and when Shannon returned home, she confronted him. He showed her some photos, saying he did a photo shoot with kids with cancer. Grace apologized for suspecting him of cheating and then told him about the missing money. Shannon helped her find a solution, and she even called the police, but they couldn't help her. When she went to the bank to check, she was hit by another problem. She was 30 days behind her mortgage payment, which was surprising because the house was already paid for over 4 years. The teller showed her her signature, saying she took out a $375,000 mortgage. It was a direct withdrawal, and now her account was overdrawn. It was notarized, and Grace got the address. When she checked, it was abandoned. Miss Gracie girl, we already know where this story's headed. Grace got her hands on very important security footage. Then she confronted Shannon about the stolen money. He tried denying it at first, but when Grace showed a video of him at the bank, he couldn't deny it any longer. He explained that he owed money to some people, but he promised to give the money back to Grace. When he got angry, Grace realized he stole the money from her accounts as well. That's when he said that as her husband, he had every right to her money. She called the police, but they told her it was a civil matter. Sarah recommended a lawyer, but the fee was so high, and Grace didn't have the money for it. When Grace returned home, she overheard bed noises coming from the master bedroom. She stumbled upon Shannon and a woman doing salsa on the bed. They laughed when Grace confronted them, and Shannon slammed the door in Grace's face. The hoe is like, "Why we at your mama's house?" Then the two went back to getting the mattress dirty. After the guests left, Grace begged Shannon to return the money to her. He laughed and kept saying it was theirs by law, and not just hers. Then he admitted that he did love Grace, just not the same way she loved him. He proceeded to describe her as a low-hanging fruit who should be grateful a man was kind enough to bet her. "Someone get this deadbeat-ass crack out of here." Grace grabbed a baseball bat and aimed for Shannon's head. She hit him multiple times, hard enough that his blood was on her face. Then she drove away, called Sarah, and told her she killed Shannon. Sarah then went to check and found out there was no body. How is Jasmine surprised there was no body when the case has been so public? After hearing the rest of the story, Jasmine meets with Sarah again. Sarah says she saw Malcolm, Grace's son, that night. Then she cries, feeling sorry for her friend. Jasmine realizes that Grace is wanting to plead guilty in order to protect her son, who may have thrown out the body. So Jasmine starts to get really serious. She tells Rory that Grace no longer wants to plead guilty. Instead, she wants to try the case. Rory is annoyed, saying he'll talk to Grace himself. But Jasmine beats him to it, and Grace says she wants to go to court. Afterward, Rory warns Jasmine that she'll get fired when she loses the case. Donnie, Tulsa, and Jordan all help Jasmine just before the trial. When the day finally arrives, the DA makes a good case against Grace, but Jasmine musters up the courage to defend her, saying it can't be murder if there's no body. She wants to call Sarah as a witness, but Grace is worried she'll get her friend in trouble. Donnie points out that the prosecution has some strong witnesses, and if Jasmine calls Sarah to the stand, they could either win or lose based on what she'll say. Sarah talks about her relationship with Grace, but with the DA's questioning, she gets caught lying and has to tell the truth eventually. Jasmine is caught off guard because she didn't see the phone records the DA is talking about. At the end, Sarah admits Grace told her she killed Shannon. Sarah is a hoe. Rory grills Jasmine about how incompetent she is. Jasmine feels like she already lost, but Jordan convinces her that she can't just give up. So on the day of the closing arguments, Jasmine keeps calling Sarah to the stand. The judge stops her every single time because both sides already rested. Still, Jasmine insists, and she soon finds herself behind bars after defying the judge's warnings. Rory visits her without his drag clothes on, just to mock her. He says Donnie is thrilled that he gets to do the closing arguments instead. Before Medea walks out, Jasmine uses the F word. Jasmine is devastated, and Jordan has to convince her to apologize to the judge so they can both go home. As for Grace, she is found guilty of murder. As she says goodbye to her friends, she notices Sarah wearing Shannon's Uzo necklace. She then realizes that Sarah is not the good friend she thought her to be. Jasmine decides to go see Sarah one last time. She sees one of Sarah's tenants looking disoriented, so she takes her back inside the house despite the old woman saying she doesn't want to go back. Inside, the tenant says she doesn't want to die just like the others, including Shane, the girl who jumped off the roof in the beginning of the movie. Jasmine realizes Shannon took Shane's identity. Meanwhile, Jordan finds out that Sarah has multiple records, so he leaves a suspect behind and rushes to rescue his wife. Jasmine checks the house and is terrified when she sees a number of women chained to the wall of the basement and left in the dark. Then a man grabs her from behind. Jasmine gets the shock of her life when she finds out that Shannon is alive, and as it turns out, he is Sarah's son. I just knew Sarah was a trifling old-ass bitch. However, she remains helpless, tied and gagged in the storage area. When Jordan arrives, he immediately calls for backup. Sarah calmly turns him away, saying that Jasmine is not there. She even asks him for a warrant. But when Jordan hears Jasmine's phone ringing from inside the house, he kicks the door open. Sarah tries to stop Jordan by attacking him from behind, but it doesn't take long before the officer overpowers and handcuffs her. Despite his injuries, Shannon is strong enough to wrestle Jordan. Jasmine then charges at Shannon with her hands still tied to the chair. When it breaks, she grabs the gun and shoots Shannon multiple times. In the end, they find out that Sarah's real name is Betty Mills and Shannon's real name is Maurice Mills. The mother and son duo has been targeting elderly women for 25 years and conning them out of their money. Maurice is also wanted in several states for multiple crimes. The judge apologizes to Grace, and her name is finally cleared. They celebrate her release, and even Rory gives Jasmine a thumbs up for a job well done. But Betty Mills has managed to escape, and somewhere in America, she has already found her new target. How this old bitch get away so easily? I feel like this movie had a lot of plot holes, but it's all right. Tyler Perry keeping us entertained. What did y'all think of this one? I like seeing some of the seasoned actors in this. I could have done with someone else playing Rory though.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.